Lila Monroe, a bright and enthusiastic 12-year-old, couldn't contain her excitement as she prepared to board her flight to Atlanta. Today was special. She was finally going to visit her beloved grandma, a journey she had dreamed about for months. Accompanying her was her father, FBI agent Marcus Monroe, whose calm presence and gentle smile always made her feel safe. The morning had been filled with a flurry of activity. Lila had carefully packed her favorite stuffed animal and a small notebook where she jotted down everything she looked forward to, stories from grandma, new recipes, and even a few scribbled ideas for a school project. Marcus, always the meticulous planner, had double-checked their tickets and confirmed the flight details on his phone, ensuring nothing would go amiss. At the bustling airport, the pair navigated through security and made their way to the gate. Lila's eyes sparkled as she watched planes taxiing on the runway, and she clutched her dad's hand tightly, savoring every moment of the adventure. Marcus, though proud of his daughter's excitement, maintained a professional reserve, a reminder of the serious work he did every day as an FBI agent. Even so, he couldn't help but smile when he saw Lila's infectious energy light up every corner of the terminal. Once on board, they found their seats in the Economy Plus section, a little extra legroom that Marcus appreciated after long days in the field. As the plane began its ascent, Lila pressed her face against the small oval window, mesmerized by the patchwork of city lights fading below. For a few precious moments, the cabin felt like a private world of wonder, separate from the weight of everyday responsibilities. Marcus, seated a few rows behind, kept a watchful eye on his daughter while occasionally glancing at his tablet to review his notes for an upcoming briefing. Their quiet conversation about the upcoming visit and the stories Lila hoped to hear from Grandma filled the cabin with warmth and anticipation. In that cocoon of high-altitude calm, Lila's excitement was palpable, a mixture of childlike wonder and the promise of new experiences. Meanwhile, Marcus found solace in the thought that despite his often difficult and stressful job, moments like these made everything worthwhile. His heart swelled with pride at watching his daughter grow and embrace life's adventures, even if the journey was as simple as a flight to see her grandma. Little did they know that what began as a joyful family trip would soon be interrupted by a series of unexpected events that would test their composure, reveal hidden biases, and ultimately strengthen their bond. But for now, as the plane soared above the clouds and the world below shrank to a mosaic of colors, Lila Monroe and FBI agent Marcus Monroe savored the beginning of a journey filled with hope and anticipation. As the plane cruised steadily through the sky, Lila Monroe was busy marveling at the view outside her window when a commotion near the entrance of the economy cabin caught her attention. Marcus Monroe, sitting a few rows behind, sensed something amiss when he noticed an elderly woman making her way down the aisle. The woman, who introduced herself later as Evelyn Greenbrier, moved with an air of entitlement. Dressed in a well-worn cardigan and carrying a small purse, she exuded a certain stern authority that immediately put Marcus on alert. Evelyn stopped at the row where Lila was seated. With a huff and a slight grimace, she demanded, "Young lady, you must vacate this seat at once. It's far too uncomfortable for someone with my sensitive back." Her tone was both abrupt and imperious, as if her comfort were a non-negotiable right that trumped every other concern. Lila's eyes widened in confusion. She clutched her favorite stuffed toy tighter to her chest and glanced around uncertainly. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his attention fixed on the unfolding scene. "Ma'am," he said politely but firmly, "this is an assigned seat in Economy Plus. There's no need to switch seats." But Evelyn would have none of it. "I insist," she snapped, her voice rising in volume, "because I have a back condition that makes these seats unbearable. You should be grateful that someone like me is even here to ensure comfort." Her words, laced with an air of superiority, caused several nearby passengers to shift in their seats, their attention drawn to the dispute. Marcus could sense the tension building in the cabin as whispers began to circulate. He exchanged a brief look with a sympathetic flight attendant, Olivia Bennett, who was nearby preparing for the next segment of service. Despite his busy schedule and the long flight ahead, Marcus felt compelled to intervene, his protective instinct for his daughter overriding any impulse to let the situation escalate. Before anyone could further fuel the confrontation, Evelyn turned her glare toward Lila. "You, child," she ordered, "give up that seat immediately and let me have some space." Lila, frightened and confused, trembled slightly as she looked up at the elderly woman. Her voice, barely a whisper, was lost in the rising clamor. Marcus stood up, his expression stern. "Ma'am, my daughter is in that seat, and it is part of our ticketed accommodation. I must insist you refrain from interfering with our seating arrangements." His tone was calm but carried a weight of authority that made it clear he was not to be trifled with. Evelyn's face contorted with indignation. "I have every right to demand comfort on this flight," she declared. "You're making it difficult for me to travel, and that's unacceptable." Her insistence seemed to border on a personal vendetta, and the friction in the confined space of the plane was palpable. Passengers nearby murmured quietly, some in support of Marcus's calm defiance, others too cautious to voice their opinions. Lila's eyes filled with tears as she struggled to understand why an adult would speak to her so harshly. Meanwhile, Marcus felt a knot form in his stomach, not only for his daughter's distress but also for the brewing conflict that threatened to disrupt an otherwise routine flight. Despite Evelyn's repeated demands, Marcus maintained his position. He reminded her that the seat was clearly designated as Economy Plus and that any change would require coordination with the airline staff. His measured tone contrasted sharply with Evelyn's escalating complaints. In that tense moment, it became clear that this confrontation was more than just a simple request for a seat change. It hinted at deeper issues, a clash of entitlement, age, and an undercurrent of bias that would soon ripple through the cabin. As the flight continued, both Marcus and Lila braced themselves for what might come next, aware that this was only the beginning of a storm that could alter the course of their journey. Before long, the situation on board took a darker turn. Still unsettled by the initial request for a seat switch, Evelyn Greenbrier's behavior became increasingly abrasive. Now, as the flight continued at cruising altitude, her tone shifted from a polite demand to outright insults. Standing near Lila's row, she glared at the young girl and snapped, "You're too large for this seat." Her words, laced with cruelty, were directed not just at Lila's physical appearance but seemed meant to undermine her dignity. Lila, already frightened by the earlier confrontation, shrank further into her seat. Her eyes welled with tears as she tried to shrink away from Evelyn's harsh glare. The discomfort in the confined space of the airplane amplified her distress. Meanwhile, the nearby passengers exchanged uneasy looks, clearly disturbed by the tone and content of Evelyn's remarks. At this point, Olivia Bennett, a patient flight attendant known for her calm demeanor, stepped into the fray. Sensing that the situation might escalate further, she approached the group with a gentle smile, hoping to defuse the tension. "Ma'am, please," she said softly, addressing Evelyn, "we understand that you have a sensitive back, but let's try to keep this conversation respectful for everyone's sake." Evelyn scoffed at the suggestion, her voice rising even further as she retorted, "Respect? I demand respect. And this child is taking up a seat that should be rightfully mine." The remark was both absurd and cruel, a clear indication that Evelyn's behavior was rooted in deep-seated prejudice. The confrontation quickly drew more attention. Passengers began recording the exchange on their phones, their murmurs filling the cabin as they reacted to the escalating hostility. Lila's eyes darted around in desperation, and Marcus Monroe, who had remained quiet until now, felt his protective instincts flare. His heart pounded with a mixture of anger and concern for his daughter's well-being. Olivia Bennett continued to try and mediate, her voice calm but firm. "Ma'am, I really must ask you to refrain from insulting the other passengers. Let's resolve this without further escalation." Yet Evelyn was unmoved by her plea. Instead, she launched into another tirade, this time making disparaging comments about Lila's appearance and her behavior. Her words, though thinly veiled insults, stung deeply and sparked murmurs of disbelief among the nearby travelers. Marcus, unable to tolerate the abuse any longer, rose from his seat. "Enough," he declared, his tone low but resolute, drawing the attention of those around him. "My daughter is not to be insulted or harassed." His words carried the weight of his position and the authority he had cultivated as an FBI agent. The shift in atmosphere was palpable. The previously subdued cabin was now a stage for a clash of wills, where the dignity of a child and the integrity of a father were at stake. Marcus moved closer to Lila, gathering her into a protective stance, while still maintaining a respectful tone toward the other passengers. "I ask you, please, to stop this needless confrontation," he said firmly, "or I will have no choice but to escalate this matter with the flight crew." Evelyn, now visibly rattled by Marcus's intervention, tried to regain control of the situation with a dismissive wave of her hand. "You're overreacting," she snapped, "this is nothing but a minor inconvenience." But her words only fueled the tension further, as her tone betrayed an underlying anger that was hard to ignore. At that moment, Olivia Bennet stepped in again, now flanked by another attendant, in a final attempt to restore calm. "Sir, ma'am, I must insist that we keep this conversation civil," she said, addressing both Marcus and Evelyn. "Our priority is the safety and comfort of all passengers, and we cannot allow personal attacks to disrupt this flight any further." The exchange had now reached a crescendo. Passengers were watching intently, some silently rooting for Marcus's calm defense of his daughter, others appearing uneasy at the brewing conflict. Lila's tears had slowed, but her wide eyes spoke volumes about her fear. Marcus, standing protectively before her, knew that this confrontation was not simply about a disputed seat, it was a battle for respect and dignity that had now captured the attention of everyone on board. Marcus's firm tone and the unwavering support of the flight attendants began to tip the balance. The heated insults from Evelyn, which had once flowed freely, began to falter under the weight of authority. Yet the damage had been done. The hostile words and the painful glances would linger in the memories of those who witnessed the scene. As the tension slowly started to subside, the conversation remained charged with unresolved emotion. Marcus and Olivia exchanged determined looks, silently promising to ensure that no further harm came to Lila during the remainder of the flight. Though the immediate confrontation had cooled, the ripple effects of the hateful words would continue to echo in the cabin for the rest of the journey. With the situation escalating on board, the atmosphere in the cabin became almost unbearable. The abusive remarks from Evelyn Greenbrier had pushed the conflict to a breaking point. Seeing his daughter Lila Monroe trembling in her seat, FBI agent Marcus Monroe knew that he could no longer stand by. Stepping forward with resolute authority, he addressed the agitated elderly woman. "Ma'am," Marcus said in a low, controlled tone, "I will not allow you to harass my daughter any further." His eyes, filled with quiet determination, met Evelyn's accusing gaze. "Your behavior is not only disrespectful but completely unwarranted. Lila is seated in Economy Plus as per our ticket, and there is absolutely no need for you to interfere with her comfort." Evelyn's face contorted with anger and indignation. "I demand you let me have that seat because I have a sensitive back," she bellowed, her voice echoing through the narrow aisle. "How dare you keep a proper person from traveling comfortably?" Marcus's tone remained unyielding. "I understand that you have your concerns, but you have no right to impose them on my daughter. The seat allocation is determined by the airline, and I will not tolerate any further disruption." His words carried a weight that silenced several nearby passengers. At that moment, a hushed murmur rippled through the cabin. Olivia Bennet, the calm flight attendant who had attempted to mediate earlier, stepped closer. "Sir, please allow Agent Monroe to handle this matter," she advised softly. "I assure you, we want to ensure everyone's safety." Her respectful tone lent additional authority to Marcus's firm stance. Evelyn's eyes narrowed, and she spat back, "I know my rights. I'm a paying customer, and I deserve comfort. Your stubbornness is making my journey miserable." The words were laced with entitlement, but also a bitterness that seemed rooted in personal prejudice. Marcus leaned in slightly, his voice calm but unyielding. "Your insistence on changing my daughter's seating is baseless, and I must remind you that any further interference will not be tolerated. I ask you to step back and allow us to continue our journey without further incident." The firmness in his tone left little room for argument. Around them, a few passengers exchanged glances of approval, silently commending Marcus's defense of his daughter. The tension in the aisle, though still thick, began to show signs of easing as Evelyn's rhetoric started to lose its edge. Yet, her eyes still burned with unresolved anger. In a final bid to assert his authority, Marcus paused and, with a subtle yet deliberate motion, reached into his jacket pocket. He drew out his FBI badge and held it discreetly for a moment, letting the light catch its official insignia. "I am an FBI agent," he stated quietly, "and I assure you that my daughter's well-being is my utmost priority. Any further harassment will be documented and dealt with accordingly." The mention of his credentials, combined with his calm resolve, caused a flicker of uncertainty to cross Evelyn's face. Her previously brazen tone wavered as she glanced around, aware that several passengers were now recording the exchange. For a long, tense second, the cabin was silent except for the soft hum of the airplane's engines. "Listen," Marcus continued, his voice steady and imbued with quiet authority, "this is not about personal preferences, it's about respect and the rights of all passengers. I warn you, if this behavior continues, the situation will be escalated with the flight crew and appropriate authorities." His final words resonated in the hushed space, leaving no doubt about his determination to protect Lila. Evelyn's eyes flickered with a mixture of defiance and apprehension. The display of Marcus's badge, a symbol of law and order, had clearly unsettled her. Though she tried to muster a retort, the pressure of the moment forced her into a reluctant silence. With a huff, she muttered, "You're just overreacting," but her voice lacked the conviction it once had. Marcus's gaze softened as he looked toward Lila, who was watching the exchange with wide, anxious eyes. He knelt briefly to reassure her, offering a gentle smile before returning his focus to the confrontation. "Let's all try to remain calm," he said, directing his words to both Evelyn and the surrounding passengers. "I simply want to ensure that everyone on this flight can travel in peace." The other passengers, now clearly divided in their sympathies, watched the exchange with a mix of relief and contemplation. Some nodded in silent approval, while others murmured words of support to Marcus. It was evident that his intervention had shifted the dynamics of the confrontation, bringing a sense of order back to the situation. In that charged moment, Marcus's firm yet measured defense of his daughter set a clear boundary, a line that would not be crossed. The tension in the aisle began to ebb, replaced by a cautious calm as Evelyn's angry rhetoric subsided under the weight of undeniable authority. Though the conflict had not been entirely resolved, it was clear that Marcus Monroe would stand unwavering in his duty to protect Lila, no matter the cost. As the tension in the cabin reached a fever pitch, and with passengers watching intently, Marcus Monroe took a subtle but decisive step. Realizing that words alone might not be enough to defuse the situation, he slowly reached into his jacket and, with a deliberate calm, flashed his FBI badge. The polished emblem glinted under the overhead lights, a clear and unmistakable sign of his authority. The moment the badge was visible, the atmosphere in the aisle shifted. Evelyn Greenbrier's defiant expression faltered, her eyes widening as she took in the official insignia. The very air seemed to still as passengers recorded the unfolding moment, their smartphones capturing every detail. Marcus continued, his voice unwavering, "I am an FBI agent. I assure you, there is no cause for your baseless accusations." His tone, though measured, carried a weight that resonated deeply with everyone watching. For a long, charged moment, silence reigned. Evelyn's earlier arrogance dissolved into uncertainty. The words she had hurled moments before, insults and derogatory claims, suddenly seemed hollow in the face of undeniable authority. The flight attendants exchanged relieved glances, and a few passengers murmured their support. It was clear that the display of his credentials had turned the tide. Evelyn stuttered, her voice now subdued. I didn't realize," she began, but the words trailed off as Marcus's steady gaze met hers. The room's focus narrowed to the interplay of defiance and authority, and even those who had been on the fence now sided with Marcus. The evidence of his identity dispelled any lingering doubts among the crew and the onlookers. Marcus didn't wait for a full admission from Evelyn. Instead, he pressed on with quiet firmness, I must insist that you cease all further harassment of my daughter. All your actions are being recorded, and any continued disruption will have consequences. His words were clear and without ambiguity, any further hostility would be met with decisive action. The announcement hung in the air as the tension slowly began to ease. Evelyn's posture sagged slightly, her earlier aggression now tempered by the realization that she was cornered. A few passengers who had been watching now offered sympathetic looks toward Marcus and Lila. In that moment, the power dynamics had shifted irreversibly. Marcus's calm yet resolute display of authority not only protected his daughter but also sent a powerful message to everyone on board: disrespect and harassment would not be tolerated, regardless of one's age or status. The officers present nodded subtly, their presence reinforcing his warning. For Lila, who had watched the entire episode with wide, frightened eyes, her father's actions provided a measure of comfort. Although the situation had been deeply unsettling, Marcus's firm resolve and the unmistakable symbol of his badge helped restore a sense of security in the confined space of the airplane. She clutched her small toy closer, drawing strength from her father's calm demeanor. In the ensuing moments, Evelyn attempted to mumble an apology, her voice barely audible over the soft hum of the airplane engines. But Marcus, maintaining his composure, stated unequivocally, your apology will be noted once you cease all hostile behavior. Until then, I advise you to remain seated and let the flight proceed without further incident. As the conversation dwindled, the cabin's atmosphere gradually returned to a more subdued calm. Passengers resumed their quiet activities, though the memory of the confrontation lingered in whispers and exchanged glances. Marcus tucked his badge away, his mind already shifting back to ensuring his daughter's well-being for the remainder of the flight. Though the moment had been charged with tension and raw emotion, it was clear that Marcus's decisive action had set a clear precedent. In the balance between authority and respect, his display of the FBI badge had tilted the scales firmly in favor of order. And as the plane continued on its course, Marcus Monroe's quiet assurance served as a steadfast reminder that, even in the face of baseless harassment, dignity and truth would prevail. After the tense display of his badge, Marcus Monroe maintained his calm, determined to ensure that the incident would not escalate further. Still aware that every word exchanged was being captured, he took a moment to address the situation in a final, measured statement. Lowering his voice slightly so that only those nearby could hear, he said, I want to make it absolutely clear, every interaction here is being recorded. Any further harassment directed toward my daughter, Lila, will result in immediate legal consequences. His tone was firm, yet not aggressive, merely a clear, unambiguous warning that there would be accountability. Evelyn Greenbrier, now visibly shaken by the display of official authority and the knowledge that her actions were documented, tried to muster a weak retort. I didn't mean any harm, she stuttered, but her voice lacked conviction. The realization that her behavior had been exposed, and would be reviewed by the proper authorities, seemed to sink in. Marcus continued, I suggest you take a moment to reflect on your actions. You have no right to disrupt the safety and comfort of others, and any further misconduct will be reported. His words echoed in the now quiet aisle, carried by the steady hum of the airplane. Nearby passengers nodded or murmured their approval, their expressions reflecting relief that the matter was being handled with professionalism and firmness. Taking in the seriousness of the moment, a flight attendant approached the scene. Olivia Bennett stepped forward with a calm yet authoritative presence. Sir, ma'am, she said, we appreciate your cooperation. Let's try to ensure the rest of this flight is peaceful. Her interjection added another layer of support for Marcus's stance, underscoring that the cabin's order was paramount. Evelyn, now looking downcast, avoided further eye contact and muttered something inaudible. Her earlier bravado had dissolved under the weight of Marcus's unequivocal warning and the clear evidence of her past intrusions. Realizing that any further outburst would only exacerbate her situation, she finally said, Fine. I'm sorry. Her voice was small, almost pleading, as if she hoped that a simple apology might allow her to salvage what little dignity she had left. Marcus regarded her coolly, his expression unreadable. Your apology is noted, but I must warn you. Any further disruptions will be met with immediate action. I trust you understand the gravity of this situation. His statement was both a reassurance to the passengers and a final ultimatum to Evelyn. For Lila, who had watched the confrontation with wide, tearful eyes, her father's words provided a protective shield. She clutched her favorite toy tightly, feeling reassured by the firm yet caring manner in which Marcus had handled the situation. The tension in the cabin, though not entirely gone, began to recede as the officers and crew made it clear that order would be maintained. Passengers slowly returned to their seats, and the murmurs of conversation shifted from anxious speculation to subdued relief. Marcus, having delivered his warning and reaffirmed his commitment to protecting his daughter, returned to his seat. He maintained a quiet vigil over Lila for the rest of the flight, his eyes occasionally scanning the cabin to ensure that the delicate balance of calm remained undisturbed. In that charged moment, Marcus's recorded warning was a testament to his unwavering determination to safeguard his family's dignity. Every word he spoke, firm, resolute, and measured, served as a reminder that harassment, especially when it stemmed from deep-seated prejudice, would not be tolerated under any circumstances. And as the plane continued its journey through the night, the quiet hum of the engines provided a steady backdrop to the knowledge that justice, even in the confined space of an airplane, was a responsibility that Marcus Monroe took very seriously. As the tension gradually subsided from Marcus's stern warning, the disturbance had caught the attention of the cabin crew. Within minutes, the captain's voice rang out over the intercom, commanding attention with calm authority. "This is Captain Ramirez. I have been informed of an incident involving disruptive behavior in the cabin. I ask that all passengers remain seated and calm. If any further inappropriate behavior occurs, we will take additional steps to ensure the safety and comfort of everyone on board." The announcement resonated throughout the cabin, lending a sense of finality to the confrontation. Meanwhile, the flight attendants gathered briefly with Marcus near the front, whispering that they were closely monitoring the situation. Olivia Bennett, who had played a key role earlier in diffusing the tension, added, "We appreciate your cooperation. We're here to ensure a safe and respectful journey for everyone." Evelyn Greenbrier, now visibly subdued and deflated, found herself unable to muster any further protest. Her earlier anger had given way to a mixture of humiliation and resignation. With a barely audible sigh, she muttered, I'm sorry," before retreating to her assigned seat. The transformation in her demeanor was palpable, where once she had exuded aggression, now she appeared vulnerable, as if the combined weight of Marcus's warning and the captain's intervention had finally broken through her defiance. Marcus, still standing protectively near Lila, took a moment to reassure his daughter. He knelt beside her and whispered comforting words, his eyes gentle yet resolute. "It's all going to be all right, Lila," he said softly. "We're safe, and everything will be fine." His reassurances, delivered with the calm authority of someone who had faced countless challenges, provided a protective balm for the frightened girl. The cabin's atmosphere, though still tinged with the memory of the confrontation, began to return to a semblance of normalcy. Passengers resumed their quiet conversations, and the flight attendants continued their rounds, ensuring that service went on as planned. Captain Ramirez's intervention had effectively quelled any further outbursts, and the crew appeared determined to maintain order. In the minutes that followed, a few passengers approached Marcus, expressing their gratitude for the way he had handled the situation. "Thank you for standing up for your daughter," one whispered. Others nodded in quiet support, affirming that his measured responses had made them feel safer and more respected as fellow travelers. As the flight progressed, the incident slowly receded into a background memory, though the lesson it imparted lingered. Marcus remained vigilant, occasionally glancing toward Evelyn's seat to ensure that no further disruptions occurred. The captain's announcement, clear and decisive, had reinforced the idea that respect and decency were non-negotiable, no matter how confined the space or how long the journey. By the time the plane began its descent, the once tumultuous cabin had transformed into an environment of subdued calm. Passengers seemed to relax, their earlier tension replaced by a cautious optimism that the ordeal was truly behind them. Marcus and Lila, still seated together, exchanged a quiet, knowing look, a silent understanding that while the events of the flight would be remembered, they had successfully navigated a storm of hostility and prejudice. As the final preparations for landing took place, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. His actions on the flight had not only protected his daughter but had also reaffirmed his belief in the power of calm authority and integrity in the face of adversity. And as the plane touched down, the cabin's collective sigh of relief marked the end of a journey that had tested the mettle of everyone on board. Once the plane landed, a quieter yet reflective atmosphere settled over the airport terminal. Marcus Monroe, still accompanied by his daughter Lila, made his way through customs and towards the baggage claim. The incident on board had left its mark, not just on him but on many of the passengers who had witnessed it. News of the altercation had spread quickly through social media, with several bystanders posting snippets of the confrontation. Yet amidst the swirling commentary, many expressed gratitude for the dignified manner in which Marcus had defended his daughter. Outside the terminal, in the cool evening air, Lila clutched her father's hand tightly. Her eyes, still red from tears, now held a glimmer of relief and understanding. Marcus paused a moment before heading toward the taxi stand. "It's all behind us now," he reassured her softly. "You did nothing wrong, and I'm proud of you." His words, gentle yet resolute, soothed Lila, and she smiled shyly in return. In the following hours, Marcus took time to file a detailed report with the airline and the appropriate authorities regarding the incident. His thorough documentation, including video recordings and witness statements from other passengers, served as a testament to his commitment to upholding the dignity of every traveler. This process, while time-consuming, was essential to ensure that such disruptive behavior would not be tolerated in the future. Later, as he waited for a ride home, Marcus sat on a bench outside the terminal and reviewed the incident report on his phone. The report detailed every step, from the initial dispute with Evelyn Greenbrier to the captain's decisive intervention. It even noted the supportive remarks from passengers, emphasizing that his calm conduct had helped restore order. Marcus's heart swelled with a mixture of relief and quiet vindication. Though the ordeal had been distressing, it reinforced his belief that integrity and calm authority were indispensable, even in the most unexpected of circumstances. When the taxi arrived, Marcus and Lila headed home, their journey now a blend of exhaustion and cautious optimism. On the drive, Lila asked softly, "Daddy, will things like that ever happen again?" Marcus glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his eyes reflecting both determination and tenderness. "I can't promise there won't be challenges," he replied, "but I promise you, I will always do everything I can to protect you and stand up for what's right." His reassurance, simple yet profound, filled Lila with a renewed sense of security. Back at their modest home in the city, Marcus and Lila spent the evening in quiet companionship. The conversation shifted from the stressful events of the flight to lighter topics, a favorite family recipe, plans for an upcoming visit to the park, and even a funny story from Marcus's earlier career days. The incident, though not forgotten, began to fade into the background as warmth and familial love took over. In the days that followed, local news outlets picked up the story of the disruptive flight incident. While some headlines focused on the controversy, many also highlighted the exemplary conduct of Marcus Monroe as a father and a professional. Online discussions ensued, with community members praising his restraint and dedication. Marcus's measured response had not only diffused a potentially volatile situation but had also sparked a conversation about respect and the importance of standing up against harassment. For Marcus, the ordeal became a lesson in resilience, a reminder that even in moments of intense pressure, maintaining one's integrity was paramount. As he continued to work at Tech Vibe and navigate the challenges of his demanding career, he carried with him the knowledge that his actions had made a difference. And every time he looked at Lila's smiling face, he was reminded that, in the end, love and justice would always prevail. Later that evening, as the family settled in after their turbulent journey, Marcus Monroe turned his attention to comforting his daughter, Lila, who was still visibly shaken by the events on the flight. In the soft glow of the living room lamp, he sat beside her on the couch and began to share stories, tales from his early days in the field, humorous anecdotes from past missions, and even light-hearted memories of his own childhood adventures. "Did I ever tell you about the time I almost got locked out of the office on a snowstorm?" Marcus asked, his voice warm and engaging. Lila's eyes, which had been downcast moments earlier, slowly brightened as she listened. The familiar cadence of her father's storytelling had a calming effect on her, easing the tension that had built up during the flight. Marcus spoke of the challenges he'd faced in his career, stories that, while sometimes tinged with seriousness, often ended with a laugh or a lesson learned. He described how, despite all the obstacles, the power of perseverance had always shone through. His stories were more than just entertainment, they were reminders that adversity could be overcome with determination and a positive outlook. As the evening wore on, Lila began to share her own small victories at school, the projects she was excited about, and her hopes for the future. The conversation, light and full of laughter, gradually pushed aside the painful memories of the earlier confrontation. In those shared moments, the bond between father and daughter grew even stronger, built on trust, understanding, and a mutual commitment to facing life's challenges head-on. For Marcus, the gentle art of storytelling became a means of healing, not only for Lila but for himself as well. Every tale he recounted reinforced the idea that, even in a world where prejudice and cruelty sometimes reared their ugly heads, there was also resilience, humor, and the unwavering support of loved ones. By the time they finished their conversation, Lila's tears had been replaced with smiles, and her earlier fear had given way to a quiet hope. In that intimate setting, Marcus's words served as both reassurance and a reminder of the strength that came from within. Lila learned that while life might present unexpected challenges, she was never alone. And as she drifted off to sleep that night, she did so with the comforting knowledge that her father's unwavering presence and the power of a good story could turn even the darkest moments into stepping stones toward a brighter future. Upon landing in Atlanta, the hustle and bustle of the airport seemed to wash away the tension of the flight. As the plane taxied to the gate, Lila Monroe clutched her father's hand, her eyes still reflecting the remnants of the earlier ordeal but now mixed with newfound resilience. The journey had been far from ordinary, and the incident on board had left a lasting impression on both of them. Stepping off the plane, Marcus led Lila through the busy terminal. The bright lights and the chatter of fellow travelers provided a stark contrast to the stifling tension of the cabin. As they made their way to the exit, Lila paused for a moment, gazing out at the cityscape of Atlanta, a city known for its vibrant energy and rich culture. In that quiet instant, she reflected on everything that had transpired. "I learned something important today, Daddy," Lila said softly, her voice a mix of wonder and determination. "Even when people are mean or unfair, it seems like justice still finds a way. I want to be brave like you, and I want to stand up for myself and others, just like you do." Her words, simple yet powerful, resonated deeply with Marcus. Marcus smiled warmly, his heart swelling with pride and relief. "That's right, sweetheart. The world isn't always fair, but standing up for what is right makes all the difference," he replied. His tone was gentle, filled with the wisdom of years spent navigating complex challenges. "Every time we face something tough, we have the chance to learn and grow stronger." In the taxi ride to their destination, Lila leaned against her father, absorbing his steady presence. Marcus recounted bits of the day's events, not with bitterness but as a reminder of the importance of dignity, courage, and compassion. He explained that despite the prejudice and hostility they had encountered, their actions had ensured that justice prevailed on that flight. His calm intervention and unwavering stance had not only protected Lila but also set an example for everyone who had witnessed it. When they finally arrived at her grandma's home, a warm, welcoming house surrounded by magnolia trees, Lila took one last look back at the bustling airport. In her heart, she vowed that she would never let anyone treat her or others unfairly. She understood that the fight for respect and justice wasn't over, but that every challenge was an opportunity to stand tall and speak out. Later that night, as Lila lay in bed, she reflected on the day's events. The memory of the confrontation, the comforting stories from her father, and the sight of Atlanta's skyline mingled in her thoughts. In that quiet moment, she realized that even in the face of prejudice and adversity, resilience and hope could prevail. Inspired by her father's strength and the lessons of the day, Lila Monroe made a silent promise, to always stand up for herself and for others, to speak truth to power, and to carry forward the legacy of courage instilled in her by her father. And so, as the city of Atlanta embraced the night, Lila drifted off to sleep with a heart full of determination and a spirit ready to face whatever challenges tomorrow might bring.